Today I am pumped to bring on a special guest. Now he's not doing the lead podcasting, the hosting on some interesting topics. We're bringing on Davis Mattek from Sports Grid, from the Takecast, from the Swolecast, and maybe many other casts. Longtime fantasy football mind, personality, wizard, whatever you want to call him. I'm excited to talk to Davis, chop it up, get into a little bit of his background, obviously talk a little bit of best ball, and a ton more. So let's get into it. All right, Davis. The first thing I decided I'm going to start asking people on this particular show. I'm stealing this from one of my favorite podcasts. But what is the single worst player take that you've had, player you've drafted? Now that we're in the best ball days, could be a guy you took a huge stand on or, had heavy exposure to. What's the absolute worst fantasy football pick, that you've touted or whatever in your life, in your career?
It's funny you asked this because there probably would have been some older ones back from the original RotoViz days that were pretty bad. But truly the worst one in the entire time I've done this as my job. It's got to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire ahead of Jonathan Taylor and CeeDee Lamb in rookie drafts 2 years ago, and as a first round pick 2 years ago, and even as what was he, back end of the second round, high end of the third round. Just Clyde Edwards-Helaire as an entity. It's got to be, because it was bad, I think, from a process perspective, in the sense of just assuming that he was going to be this workhorse guy, and bad luck, bad in terms of the amount of money it cost me. And all these dynasty leagues, Jonathan Taylor's the number one asset, and I can't get a second round pick for Clyde Edwards-Helaire in these leagues, and it's just going to continue to haunt me. It's not going to get any better.
Yeah, the opportunity cost. There's always opportunity cost with, like you said, in dynasty drafts with guys like that. That year, it was the worst miss by the team, by the Chiefs and by fantasy drafters on CEH, and it's only just magnified times 1,000 when there's JT and there's Swift. There was T. Higgins. There was just an infinite amount of guys who are just absolute smashes around CEH. And it's the perfect example of the impossible balance in fantasy football of player or prospect over situation. It's sometimes Leonard Fournette is not very good at football.
He's really not.
Tom Brady throws it to him and they hand it to him at the goal line. So guess what? He's going to score a lot of fantasy points. But, DeAndre Swift is pretty awesome and the Lions suck. And so you're figuring that out is impossible. I lean on people like you to kind of I listen to you and Gretch and Corain and everything to kind of get down in the weeds on some of that stuff, because I think it's by far the hardest part of all this.
Yeah, identifying who is good. It's actually not that hard from college to pro, at least in the sense of putting guys in percentiles and comparing them.
Right.
I think some of the hardest stuff to deal with is when players who are highly drafted by the NFL and who look good as prospects struggle as rookies. I think that's actually the hardest stuff to contextualize. Laviska, second round pick, looks really good as a prospect. What do you have? 650 yards and 3 touchdowns as a rookie, which is fine, but not great. And so he's a 7th round pick again. And now it's complete dust. I actually find guys who struggle as rookies, and honestly, regardless of position, Trevor Lawrence, right? I just what do you do with that? What do you blame on coaching? What is injuries? What is bad luck? What is variance? It's very hard, I think, to do that stuff.
That's actually a really great point. And I think I think you're right. I think I agree, because we always have this conversation every offseason where, and how society is nowadays, it's got to be very polarized, but everybody, this guy stinks or this guy is good. There's never any well, it could be this or it could be that. Justin Fields was terrible. Trevor Lawrence was terrible. Are they just bad? Are they just young? Was it the situation? Who knows? But like it's difficult because there's only one Devontae Adams that just absolutely stunk. Was legitimately terrible.
It's so rare for the
Yeah.
third year breakout, or like Tyler Lockett, who was like a bit player his entire rookie contract. Like that stuff is, I mean, you're talking about two guys every 10 years who are like not only bad, but like afterthoughts on their team. Like if Hardman with Kelsey gone, or with Tyreek gone, like if Hardman does something now, year 4, it would be beyond bizarre for that to happen.
Right. And so you're balancing that with what are other people thinking? Like, is everybody really out on McColl? Like, are we like, let's just say, let's put a situation together, because Alex is asking, are the Chiefs in rebuild mode? And I think kind of yes and no, but and we'll get into the Chiefs for sure. You and I talked about it a lot yesterday. But let's say they draft Jameson Williams and that's it. No Will Fuller, they pick up some bum free agent, right? Not even MVS, and so McColl has all the opportunity in the world. If the market is like, nope, he sucks, not falling for this trick again, it's like, well, I'm probably going to fall for it. I'm probably going to fall for it again.
Yeah, it's just like, right, all right, underdog a check right now, because right. I already know. Like if McColl Hardman and Jameson Williams, like if it's Hardman and Jameson Williams as the perimeter wide receivers, because remember, I was actually talking with like my real life buddies who obviously are all Chiefs fans yesterday, and I reminded them like Pringle's gone too. He actually played the second most snaps at wide receiver for them last year. So Robinson's gone, Tyreek is gone, and Pringle is gone. That was 3 of their top 4 wide receivers. Now Smith-Schuster is going to slot in, and he's going to play every available snap out of the slot. But you still have like roughly still about 60% of the total wide receiver snaps to be filled.
Yeah, and you talked about also yesterday, like kind of cheap, cost-controlled labor. McColl's the only one they got other than whoever they draft this year. You know what I mean? And so they are sort of incentivized in this weird spot to like, let's run it back one more time.
One more time.
One more. Like this will be it though. Like this is it. Kind of like how this is it for Tua, basically. This is it for McColl. I do actually think he might get a little bit of a shot. So it's funny that we bring him up, because it's one of those where like, if someone came to you as a tout, right, as a fantasy football analyst or whatever, and they were like, what do you think about McColl Hardman? Are you excited for him? The answer would be he sucks and no. Yeah. But then when you get into draft season, it's like, well, I'm still going to take some of them, even though I don't think it's going to work. And I think people have a really, really, really hard time with that. And like back when, definitely you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. And when I first started, that's what it was. It was, give me your takes. Who do you like? Who do you like?
Who do you like?
And now it's like, well, no, I hate McColl. I hate McColl Hardman. I don't even really like Tua. Well, we talked about these guys yesterday that like, I don't know. They seem like fine bets to me if everybody else is going to be off them. I feel like the industry has kind of really changed a lot around that aspect.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I mean, I also think, I think there's a lot of reasons for this. That people are more like price sensitive in general. I do actually think like the whole explosion of like crypto and NFTs and, Top Shot and all day. Like, I think people are just kind of used to I think they're more used to thinking about things as like a portfolio and in terms of like ranges of outcomes. Like, I think the idea of being price sensitive to players would have been like foreign to like, the average guy who listens to the CBS fantasy football podcast like 2 years ago. But I do think now, like, it's like kind of a pretty easily recognizable idea. Like, I don't like this guy at a 3rd round cost, but I do really like this guy at a 5th round cost. And I think that like Josh Jacobs actually a great example of like, that we all decided we were out on him in the 3rd round, but people who are less stubborn than me were like just gobbling him up in the 6th and 7th round of drafts last year. And Hardman, every Chiefs player is going to be like that. I'm actually curious if, getting to August and stuff like that, I wonder if Mahomes will even be the 3rd quarterback or 4th quarterback. Like, I wonder because if Clyde Edwards-Helaire is an 8th round pick, and Travis Kelce will be a top 15-ish pick regardless, but if Schuster's going in the 5th round, and then it's like Hardman, whatever rookie they draft, and Josh Gordon or whoever. Like, if Chiefs skill position players are not as expensive, I do wonder if we see a little bit of deflation on Mahomes' price tag, which I think is interesting.
which I think it would be really interesting because, again, if you haven't, Davis and I really went into the Tyreek trade quite a bit yesterday on his Sports Grid podcast, so I recommend giving that a listen. And I'm sure everybody that's listening to this has probably already heard 10 million takes on the Chiefs and the Dolphins. But I do think there's a lot up in the air with how the Chiefs are going to go attack this thing. Like it could end up. It sounds terrible. I don't even really mean a net positive like for next year, but it could end up closer where they're not trotting out Demarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle as the third and fourth wide receivers. Yes, Tyreek is gone, but you have Juju. Let's just say they get Will Fuller and one of these good young rookies, maybe two of these good young rookies. Is it really that much worse having Jameson Williams and George Pickens and Juju and Kelsey and Will Fuller versus Tyreek? Obviously, Tyreek is the man, but DeMarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle, like, is it really that much worse for Mahomes? But I think everyone's just, it's been decided this is worse for the Chiefs, no matter what happens over the next month with the draft and free agency. That's what I'm kind of leaning towards, at least.
I mean, I do think it is pretty contingent based on what they are able to add. Like, Fuller would be the big one. Fuller, I think, would kind of be the guy where I'd be like, I could really buy in on them creating something that could at least approximate what their offense used to be like. But if they, like, because Fuller is such a unique player, when he has been on the field, his offenses have always been better. Like, even when he was playing with all-world DeAndre Hopkins, Watson was better, Hopkins was better when Fuller played, and there were meaningful on and off splits with Fuller, the same way there were meaningful off and on splits for the Kansas City offense when Tyreek was in or out of the lineup. And so Fuller would be a huge one, assuming he is, like, not only did he have the finger injury, but he had like mental health issues and was away from the team. So like maybe we're overrating Fuller's impact. And yeah. I also am like way more bullish than the average person on Smith-Schuster. Like he is less than 3 years older than Treylon Burks. Like he just turned 25 and he's about to enter into his 6th NFL season. And I think, kind of what we maybe learned about him is he's miscast as like a top guy because he struggled in that first year without Antonio Brown, but he's pretty good when playing with someone else who is pretty good. And if Jameson Williams is that guy, if George Pickens is that guy, if Sky Moore is that guy, Sky Moore, I'm maybe a little bit less bullish about of, making the jump from what conference does Western Michigan play in, the WAC or whatever?
Yeah.
Something like that. I'm a little bit less bullish about him having like a MAC. Yeah. Like a year one impact. Like I think he would be a good addition to a team that needed a third wide receiver, but maybe a little bit less in a spot where they expect him to be a number one or whatever year one. But I mean, Jarvis Landry is out there. That's kind of interesting to me. It feels like the spot they missed is like, feels like they should have been in on Allen Robinson before the Rams got him. Cause he would probably be, I mean, he plays very differently than Tyreek, but he would be the boundary wide receiver that they need to make this offense work.
Right. When Tyreek or whatever the archetype of Tyreek is in that offense is taken away as Kelsey ages, having someone like Allen Robinson, that it does, like, that's what the power of like DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, like obviously they get open, they catch the ball, but it's like they're never not open. Yeah, like just throw it to him. Like when Mahomes is running around like he does sometimes, and shit, nobody's open, and Allen Robinson's in single coverage and he's covered, just throw it. He's gonna go get it half the time, and you're gonna make big plays. And those guys are just so. It's kind of like the Tyreeks and the Fullers. Fuller is like the Kmart version of Tyreek from an impact perspective. You know what I mean? Like being able to lift the lid.
He just creates space for everyone else when he's out there.
So it's like those two, when you get both of them in one, you have Calvin Johnson, or Randy Moss or whatever. But when you get those two archetypes of the guys that are just never covered, basically, and then the guys that create so much space for themselves and for the offense. Allen Robinson would have been pretty sick, because then if you do go, then you can just go all in on that burner, right? If you have Juju, Kelsey, and Allen Robinson,
then you can just take Jameson Williams and you're like, bet, like we got him. But and then the other thing with Jameson Williams is he's probably not going to be ready by week 1 coming off this knee injury, and he maybe. And as you were just talking, I realized like the big thing that all of these guys are going to have to learn. It's like, yeah, Mahomes is the best, but he also has like, when Kelsey came on the Manning cast and he was explaining how like, I don't even have routes. Like they don't even call plays for me. Like I just do whatever I want. And Pat just knows where I'm going to be. It's like, well, obviously probably that same thing existed with Tyreek. And maybe that is a big explanatory variable for why Hardman never flourished with them and why, despite Robinson, no other team in the NFL wants to give Robinson money, but the Chiefs keep re-signing him because he's just comfortable with Mahomes. And it's going to be all new guys. Like Kelsey and Hardman will be there, and then it's going to be Smith-Schuster, a rookie, someone they sign in free agency over the next couple weeks. And like that is probably going to be a huge barrier for them, especially at the beginning of the season.
I think so too. So before we move on from the Chiefs, there was a couple. Tony brings up Josh all pro. That's a leading the witness all pro Josh Gordon, and then Connor brings up Julio. I think Julio is at least mildly interesting as a.
I don't think they should sign Julio.
What if the draft doesn't shake out that way, right? What if Jameson's gone? What if Olave, Wilson, Burks, all those guys are gone, and you're picking Sky Moore and Christian Watson or whatever with your first and second round picks? Would you be more interested in a Band-Aid like Julio then, or just like, nah, fuck it, let the young kids play?
So this is where I'm at. Obviously what they lose with Tyreek is speed, and we saw what happened to the Patriots, honestly, last year. Like they're just the slowest fucking team, and they're so slow. And now you have Smith-Schuster, who maybe was fast, but is clearly transitioned out of like being that guy. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Derek Gore are running backs. Travis Kelce is going to lead your team in targets, and he's 33. Like you got to have some speed and athleticism, and like maybe Julio Jones in games he's healthy can do kind of what we were talking about with that Allen Robinson, DeAndre Hopkins thing where he's just like always open. But the whole thing that made the Chiefs so invincible for so long was the splash plays. It would just like they would just hit you with these splash plays all the time. And they looked so mortal last year throwing in front of the defense, right? Teams start doing they make the AFC Conference Championship, but clearly they were playing on way finer margins in those games too, because it just changed everything about how they were structuring their offense. And they figured it out on the fly because Andy Reid's a really good coach and Patrick Mahomes is a really good quarterback, but that's like not the most optimal way for them to be playing. And so I think like I'm just not excited about these veteran guys because none of them get them back to just once a quarter. They just have a play that goes for 40 yards and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, or shit, they had to have led the league in 70-yard touchdowns or whatever for an extended stretch.
Had to have.
It felt like in DFS, it was like every other week Tyreek caught one, or even Hardman had some big ones, and those are just like they just don't happen very much in football. And so when you're consistently putting those up, like I don't think people quite understand how it's so fucking hard to score. Consistently
so
touchdowns.
Hard to score.
So if you can do it in one play from 80 yards away, like look at some of these teams, right? They can't even fucking move the ball. We're talking about some of these quarterbacks in the NFL. So when you can just either bang, 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 25, 30, 40 touchdown, or one, right? Tyreek just, is just too fast for the defense and they happen to call the wrong defensive play for your offensive play. I mean, it's just a total backbreaker for the defense. And so I'm fascinated to see what that's part of why I'm so bullish on Jameson. I keep bringing his name up, but he's the one guy in this class. I guess Olave, but I whatever. If you prefer him with his speed, I think Jameson plays faster than Olave does, and he showed enough to do some of the little like Tyreek did. Turned into you can throw me a slant, you can throw me a hitch or whatever, but then he can catch the ball and run by the defense, and he can just run by the defense like Fuller and Deshaun Jackson and all those guys do. And so I'm trying to, exactly like what you said, side with this speed stuff. Like, trust me, a good football player is just a good football player, but these fuckers are getting so fast nowadays that if you're slow on offense, it's just going to be really difficult for you to beat the Bills and the Chiefs and the Chargers and all these good teams.
Well, it does sound like the team is pretty interested in trade and signing Marquez Valdez-Scantling, which, I mean, it doesn't solve the problem, But I'd rather MVS than Julio Jones or Jarvis Landry, I think, for what they need. Because Juju is already going to do whatever Jarvis Landry or Julio would have done for them, I think.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Jason says trade for Metcalf, and I think from a Madden perspective or something, if you just trade for Metcalf, obviously that would be awesome. I think you're kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face to do the Metcalf thing, just because yes, he's younger, but you just traded away a guy who you were going to have to pay gobs of money to keep at wide receiver, and that's what you're going to have to do with DK Metcalf. And so, not saying it's bad, but it's kind of like at that point, you might as well just kept Tyreek and kept the thing that you already knew worked in your offense, as opposed to, I guess the youth thing is nice, but you're not in any better cap situation. You're not in any better roster building situation with DK Metcalf. So that's the only problem, even though it'd be awesome to watch DK Metcalf with Patrick Mahomes.
Yes. I mean, we all want DK Metcalf on the Chiefs. Remember, Hardman got selected over DK Metcalf, I think, sort of famously at this point. But again, to your point, like, they're not trying to re-put themselves in this position where they got to pay someone $25 million. Like, they were going to pay someone that money. They should have just paid Tyreek Hill that money instead of giving up the draft pick compensation. So I don't really see a trade with any of these disgruntled star wide receivers that makes a ton of sense for them. Like, the whole point was to just take the medicine of clearing your cap a little bit, and paying Metcalf doesn't really do that.
So pivoting a little bit, but staying on the Chiefs thing, you for anybody that has followed your content and stuff, you're in this weird space as a football fan where you are simultaneously a Chiefs fan and a Cowboys fan. Can you talk about how did this happen? How did you land on being a Cowboys and a Chiefs fan?
So I grew up, my dad was a Cowboys fan. He grew up in Oklahoma, and he's old enough to be back in the time when the games you got were the national TV games, and maybe you'd get a local TV game, and they just happened to get all the Cowboys games. So he grew up being a Cowboys fan. I was a Cowboys fan. Never cared about the Chiefs. The Chiefs were always, all my friends growing up were Chiefs fans, and they were always losers, right? I mean, they were always losers. Yep. And then I moved to Kansas City the year that Mahomes got drafted, and sat on the bench behind Alex Smith, and DraftKings actually got me tickets to a couple of the games. I was at the overtime Alex Smith game against the Chargers, week 1 of the 2017 season. I don't remember which one it is, but it was this. They were down by 2 touchdowns. It was this great comeback game. And then I went to probably 4 games Mahomes' first season. I was at, it was impossible to be in that environment and not get wrapped up in it. It's like, it would be like, like when I was in college, I was an Oklahoma Sooners fan, but I was at K-State the year they were number 1 when Colin Klein was the quarterback and Auburn came to play and everything. Mm-hmm. And like, I got wrapped up in it then. And so there was just no way. And like, I just love Mahomes. Like, Mahomes he's the best. So that's how it happened. And honestly, it's great because I can just root for the Cowboys until their season is over, which generally is right around week 10 or week 11. and then when they're out, I can just stop caring and then just be all aboard the Chiefs.
That is a very good. That is a sharp take. Because you don't have to worry about the Chiefs in the first 2 months because they're going to be 7-1 or whatever it is.
Yeah, they're going to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just looking back at that game. Yeah, a Phillip Rivers, Alex Smith shootout. Spencer Ware was
right.
the running back for the Chiefs back then. I remember those days. I remember those fantasy days quite clearly too. That was before Tyreek was really a thing. Jeremy Maclin was the wide receiver 1 for the Chiefs. I still have a Jeremy Maclin jersey from those days. I think that was the first Chiefs jersey I ever bought, actually. That is great. Jeremy Maclin, Mizzou, great. So you're really touching all
he's from the neighborhood I live in right now. Like, his childhood house is like not that far away from where I live now.
That's amazing. Yeah, he's a St. Louis legend. It's always nice. It's always nice to see the local guys. You know, St. Louis actually has some pretty damn good athletics, and it does not get anywhere near the hype that it deserves. It's like people know that Jason Tatum's from St. Louis, and like that's about it. And he went to Duke, so it's not like that even matters. But it's a pretty good football area too. I mean, number one wide receiver in the
Bradley
country this
Bradley
year.
Beal.
Yep,
He's not. I don't think he's from here, but he went to Chaminade,
He went to Chaminade. Yep.
the boys prep school here.
Yeah, the St. Louis basketball factory.
Yeah.
Chaminade. So other funny story that you brought up K-State, and I had totally forgotten that you went to K-State. First football jersey I've ever owned in my entire life was an L. Roberson jersey.
Buddy, I remember him
from K-State. That team was playing NCAA football. The L. Roberson, Darren Sproles team was like the cheek. It was like whatever year the Madden game when Vic was like, you could just run around.
2004.
Yeah, but Roberson and Sproles were that cheat code in that game. They ran the triple option. You had the fastest running back in the country and the fastest quarterback in the country. And so I was a miniature. I hadn't figured out my fandom yet at that point because there was no – the Rams were terrible and all that. And so L. Roberson, I remember that jersey's probably at my parents' house somewhere stored away. Number 3 L. Roberson K-State jersey. That's
amazing. The quarterback I remember from so that was a little bit before my time. What was the name of the quarterback? Not Josh Freeman. Freeman was the K-State quarterback when I was in high school, and he was like a big deal. Like people loved him. And then Colin Klein too was after that. But Josh Freeman was like that was a huge deal that K-State had this quarterback that was like going to eventually go and play in the NFL.
Yeah, he was a monster. He was an early declare. He's like 6'7", 250. He was like Jamarcus Russell, basically, is what.
He was unreal. He was so good when he was at K-State.
He was like this just absolute free. Shouldn't be playing college quarterback. It's kind of he didn't play the same way, but it was like how I viewed Cam in college. It was just like, how the hell is this guy a college quarterback? This doesn't make any sense at all. But
like in a different universe, he would have been like a tight end.
Yeah, or a center. The dude would have played center in the 70s on an NBA team.
Right, exactly.
And he's a quarterback. Those are my fondest sports memories, though, for sure. Now I can't. There's not many teams that I can truly enjoy without gambling, without some kind of skin in the game. And so those, I always love to chat with people about like those old school memories because
being a sports fan is stupid. It's so dumb. Stupid. Like the fact that my day got like kind of ruined yesterday by the fact that Tyreek, a person I don't even really like not that good of a person, but like, because it's not that I care about Tyreek leaving or whatever. Like, he's whatever to me, but it's the fact that like Mahomes is going to have to like take a step back and like Nick Rudman is going to be dunking on me on Twitter when Mahomes has a big dude. I thought of an unbelievably cruel meme to Patrick Mahomes last night. And I was like, I could never tweet this, but I honestly kind of just want to DM it to Rudman just to see him tweet it. Cause it's like such an unbelievable dunk. But I mean, just even the fact that I would even think about that just shows how warped sports makes your brain.
That is an excellent point. And I don't like either of the teams. I fucking hate the Patriots. Being from St. Louis.
Worst.
That's just absolute. Like Brady took my team from me is like how it is basically viewed. The greatest show on turf is one of the greatest NFL teams for a short stretch that has ever existed. It was like the Chiefs, what we've seen from the Chiefs the last few years. You're hopefully, you still have Mahomes for a long time. We had late stage Kurt Warner, right, as the quarterback. So you knew it wasn't going to last forever. And then Brady came in, ripped our hearts out, took the second Super Bowl from us. And not that much later, the Rams are gone to LA, because the franchise just collapsed. And so Brady was the guy and the Patriots were the guy that you just like grew up hating. And so I don't like the Patriots. I'm not a Chiefs fan. I mean, I like Mahomes. Mahomes is just like, I don't know how you could ever dislike Mahomes. It's kind of how I felt about LeBron a little bit before. Lately, it's not, I don't feel quite the same way, but where it was like, can you ask for a better like ambassador of the game? This guy that has like dating his high school or college sweetheart, married to his high school or college sweetheart, has never gotten in trouble. Like, how are you Patrick Mahomes and you've never even got like a fucking speeding ticket? Like obviously,
I know it's crazy,
but like he's never been arrested. He's never even like tweeted anything stupid, to have that kind of fame. So I don't know how you dislike Mahomes, but you and Redmond will be having these conversations, and I find myself getting triggered.
I know because, it's like so It's so triggering to me. He really gets under my skin, and he's far from the only one. Like plenty of people, because like it's just like whoever is great has to pick up their haters. It's just like how it works. And so Mahomes has this, because the Bengals fans want everyone to think Burrow is as good, and it's the Bills fans are the ones who are really touchy about it. Where it's like if you suggest that Mahomes is clearly better than Josh Allen, they're like, "What are you talking about? The Bills," and it's just like it's like, dude, I don't know how to quantify it, but I just feel like every level-headed person knows that Mahomes is the best. Like it's no disrespect or shade to Josh Allen, who's amazing, but it just is what it is.
I know, and I feel like there's some of those takes in sports where like I feel like I'm taking crazy pills when you go onto Twitter or whatever, and you read other people's tweets or you listen to other people's shows or whatever, and they're just like, yeah, I'm not saying this example happens all the time, but like you said, where people are like, yeah, Josh Allen's the best quarterback in the NFL. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm like, that's not even a debate to me. But then you're like, to your point, I can't quantify it, but I just feel like it's stupid to say that Mahomes isn't the best quarterback. But there's like tons of those where you see all these, and like, it's so hard to not get triggered, by all of that. And then fandom, take it 1,000 steps worse. I mean, we're talking about fandom. The one team that I've like really, really started to root for St. Louis basketball, St. Louis University basketball. Cause I wanted to pick up a kind of a smaller school. My wife went there and worked there and all that kind of stuff.
The tickets are real cheap. You could go every night to their games if you want. I always see them on SeatGeek when I look, and I'm like, I'm like, hey, do you want to go to a basketball game tonight? It's like $11. I've never gone though. I do kind of want to, just because I always get to tournament time and I don't know anything. I don't know anyone who plays for any team. All I know is whatever Ken Palm's number is saying. I'm like, it would be nice to just go to like a couple games. Like, if I don't even know what their schedule is in terms of like if they ever have any big non-conference games, but it would be like fun to go.
They played Auburn this year. They had a really good non-conference game, but like I picked up that team because it was like my fandom had run out like everywhere. Like the Rams are gone. I'm not that big of a baseball fan anymore. Like during this part of the year, I get into drafting some fantasy baseball teams like Best Ball because I'm not managing that shit for 6 months. And then I kind of fall out of love with that, so didn't really have a team. And like you said, the fandom thing this morning, one of their best players declared for the NBA draft, and he's like, has literally no shot of getting drafted. And I'm like pissed. I'm like, what the fuck, and you're like getting mad about some 19 or 20-year-old kid, from St. Louis University basketball. And it's like ruining multiple hours of my morning because I'm a fan of this team. And so I guess that's good and bad that we're not getting super, super deep into the fandom because it is so freaking toxic. But on the other hand, I wish I could enjoy sports more without having to gamble on them.
Yeah. Honestly, the only sport these days that I can watch without gambling or playing fantasy is soccer. Like that's really the only thing. And honestly, I think it's because my timeline doesn't care about it. That's actually what I like. Just in general, the people that I follow don't care about it, and I think that makes it way easier to just enjoy. That's actually my diagnosis, is because I can just enjoy it, and that can just be something that it only exists inside of my brain. Basically,
that's a really good take. That's probably why I've gotten so into Formula One. Something that even like 5 years ago I would have laughed at you. Like, I don't like racing. I'm not sure I've ever watched a NASCAR race in my life. I didn't even know what Formula One was until
you watched that the Netflix series.
Yeah. When like somebody recommended it to me, like when the first season came out, they were like, dude, you got to watch this. I'm like, no, I'm not watching racing, and I was just hooked instantly. And it was the same thing. I wasn't gambling on it. I was just fascinated by the sport. It's so different, right? Kind of like how European soccer is the structure of the leagues and the sport is so different from everything we're used to here that I was, and I could watch it without my entire timeline pissing me off, like during a Sunday of football where everybody's like, tilting every penalty and every missed pass by a quarterback.
And very underrated part, and this is true for F1 too, it's at a different time of day than you're used to watching American sports. So like college basketball, NBA, 6:00 at night,
Mm-hmm.
NFL game, 6:00 at night, or, all of Sunday. Whereas soccer, flip on, I mean, it's on in the afternoon all the time here too, but Saturday, Sunday mornings. And then what F1 is Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings. Yeah. So it's like, it's just totally different from your normal schedule. And that kind of makes it more enjoyable too.
Yeah, I think that's one of you talk about on the Takecast a lot, which I totally agree with. Something I'm into, and also I agree with your take that it kind of pisses me off that I'm into it. Is this like the life hacking type stuff?
So it's so annoying, but that shit, send me a life hack article or a podcast, whatever, and I'll just devour. And it's like, that's so douchey. Like, it's so douchey to be into that, but I can't help it.
Exactly. It's like painful. Like I never thought about it that way till the first time you said it, and that's what you were like. This is probably what they talk about in like a Silicon Valley boardroom. You know what I mean? Before they start the meeting, they're all talking about their stupid fucking morning routine that they did and how energized they feel. And I'm like, God damn it! I'm like, that sounds like me. That literally sounds like me. But the sport thing was it really does. Like, I can find myself so easily triggered or just like stressed out or whatever over honestly tons of NFL shit, because there's 5,000 people on my timeline a day constantly tweeting about different NFL and NFL stuff, and there's just so much content. It's easy to get really bogged down. But like taking the time to like get into like you getting into European soccer and I it's something I'm not into and I don't have any knowledge of, but like I listened to you and Josh on your podcast and I was like, this is fucking fascinating. I'm like, I would love to learn more about this. And that's like what I did, like with Formula One or whatever. I know some people that I follow are like really into UFC, right? Or what something, but picking something else out, if you're really in like this best ball space, fantasy football, even like if you're in fantasy basketball, DFS, like it has been like almost life-changing to kind of find something else that I can like sink my teeth into and just truly enjoy. And like, I mean, my fucking wife likes it too. I guess that's partially helpful.
Oh, that's huge. If there's anything, my partner doesn't care about anything. She won't watch anything on TV, but she's always down to go, which is nice. So if I ever want to go to a Blues game or a Cardinals game or whatever, which is like, that's a fair trade. Like, I can watch a late March Cleveland Cavaliers game on the iPad. It's not that much skin off my back,
Yeah, right. That is very true. This is pretty funny from Nick. Nick is anti life hacks. He loves hearing you and Pete probably on the Takecast typically, but he gets very triggered when you guys start to get into life hacks.
It's because it's so douchey. It really is like being like, and I don't look at my phone for 30 minutes when I wake up, and I always drink a big glass of water. And it's like, fuck off, dude. Like, fuck off with your life hacks. Like, it really, like, I totally get it. Like, I would never tell someone like, yeah, you got to listen to my show for how much better it's going to make your life. But I love that shit. Like the Huberman Lab podcast. I mean, it's just not, it's so long. It's like 2 hours a week of like, don't eat sugar. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait to listen to this episode. It's going to be so good.
That is so true. But I will say on a positive note, what's it called from James Clear? The habit book,
Atomic Habits.
It did change my life. Not even just like from like, oh, I'm gonna set all these habits, set these routines and build these habits, but just how I view things and how I think about tackling things, just like a life perspective. So there are positives to some of it, but it's also like you can get over the top with it. And I agree, it's extremely douchey, but I thought it was a funny part of kind of this whole conversation. Silas says, piggybacking on the fandom thing, like watching Pats games is like gut wrenching. He's a Pats fan, but you have DFS, to kind of offset my struggle. How do you deal with this, Davis? As a Chiefs Cowboys fan, like all I care about is my DFS players on Sunday. Do you like when you're watching? Are you like watching Red Zone and watching all the games? How are you handling the fandom with the DFS aspect?
See, it's even worse for me because I have for a Sunday to not tilt me, the Chiefs have to win. I have to win in cash on DraftKings because I have to do the show on Sunday night. And my main event teams on FFPC have to go undefeated. Not just winning record, because those are expensive leagues. Like, you do not want to be losing those games. Like, it's so annoying, especially when it's close. So I think I had 5 teams last year. So it's like, I don't even know if it happened one weekend where every team won. I won in DFS and the Chiefs and Cowboys won. It's like this impossible parlay. So pretty much Sunday is just going to be terrible. I would say, honestly, like, obviously cash is like it's not a losing investment at like the lower stakes these days. Like, I'll be able to play $5 games profitably probably forever. But just having one lineup that you spent all week working on that banks is like, it is nice. Like, that if I win in cash, I'll go to sleep without like tilting too much, pretty much is how it works. It's because we do the dumb show. And then, the other thing then on the layer on top of that is, like, I spent all off season spending thousands of dollars on these best ball teams, and and Laviska Shenault is playing behind Laquan Treadwell. So if there's really, what everyone is saying in the chat is correct, which is like pretty much NFL season is not fun. Like, it gets really, and I am, my work schedule sucks. I'm at my computer from like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'm exhausted. Like, I don't want to do anything else. Like, and I eat like shit. But I mean, the off season's great. Like, right now I'm hanging out. I went to the gym this morning, hung out with my dogs. I did 2 shows today, and like, I'm pretty much wrapped up. Like, that's great. But yeah, the season is not very fun, basically.
No, it is not. But so this is everything that you said and everything that the chat said is exactly how I feel. But that rush, when it does,
it's the best, dude.
The once a year that it happens, it brings it sucks you in. You keep coming back. You keep coming back for more. Like FF Doom here says, those 3 weeks though that you hit, it makes you feel like you're on top of Mount Everest. And I totally agree. Like, I never feel so. Like, I mostly play tournaments for DFS now. I used to grind cash games really hard, but like, I know that you have the show. It's just not worth my time anymore to grind out
really
the small edge, unless it was for content purposes. And so now we're talking like playing high stakes tournaments and like live final qualifiers, because that's part of my DFS game is I'm trying to chase, the fantasy football world championship or stuff like that. And so you have to finish first against all the best players in the world, however many, 100, 200, 500 of those guys. And the GPPs are so top heavy, even outside of the live final qualifiers, that it's like, if I literally don't bink, I'm like not even happy. You know what I mean? Like winning, getting 5th in a high stakes tournament is like 10K. And it's that's sustained me for 2 more weeks.
And it's the difference, like the difference between a profitable season and a non-profitable. I can even tell you the play that determined my season. So I won in cash, but it's not like I'm not getting $10,000 down a week. So it's pretty, like, in the end of everything, I had a 6.8% ROI in cash, which is fine. I mean, that's good. Mm-hmm. But I would have had a great season had, let's see, what week was it? Had Leonard Fournette in week 7. I got 8th in the red zone, the $50 single entry, but had Leonard Fournette. So he got 3 straight touches on the 1 yard line. He got 2 carries, got stuffed, and then Tom Brady threw it to him and he dropped it. And had he scored a touchdown on any one of those, I would have gotten first for 50K, and that would have made my season. Would have been a good season. Would have been feeling really good about all the time and effort that I put in. And I got funnily enough, I got 8th in it another week because Stafford threw his 4th touchdown to Cooper Kupp instead of Van Jefferson, and had the touchdown gone the other way, I would have gotten first. So it's just like, and I'll probably remember that forever. I will probably remember Fournette not catching that pass on the goal line forever. And that's not a healthy way to live.
No, it definitely is not. While you were talking about that, there's one moment on the negative side of things from my DFS career, same thing, that has scarred me for life. And I think it's funny, like the Connor says, the bink sweat is better than drugs.
It's the best. It's the best. I remember every bink I've ever had. I remember how it happened. Remember the players involved. Yeah.
But you also, for me, I would rather just get my dick kicked in on a football Sunday. It's like I fade it. Leonard Fournette is chalk. I fade him.
Yeah.
Right. He scores 3 first half touchdowns. I close the laptop. I don't worry about it. Maybe I play some Showdown or something. and it's all good. But the oh shit, I just got off to a hot start on live.
Then
you're
it's
sweating
then you're
6 hours. 6 hours just like sweating every catch, especially on a full PPR site.
It is awful. Like when you have like the like you have the hot start, and then there is Rams Buccaneers coming up in the late games, and you're just like, fuck, this is gonna be a long day. Yeah.
That was similar. And Tony asked about sweating best ball teams, and only rage tilting best ball teams. Like, oh, Derrick Henry got hurt, but guess what? Darrington Evans has been hurt for 2 months already, and I have 40% of him, and I don't get paid off here. Or pick an injury, whatever. Maybe you drafted a bunch of Ryan Fitzpatrick. Raheem Mostert, I guess, was a good example. He took a big stand on Raheem Mostert. First play of his season, where it's over. So the best ball tilts are pretty bad, but kind of the same thing as the DFS sweat. Like Pete and I in Best Ball Mania got off to a blazing start. It was like unreal. We had Jamar Chase, obviously, which you needed in that week, but it was just like me and him are messaging. He was with Herzig at Herzig's final event or whatever for what's it called? Own the Moment. And
yes.
It's like we're like, oh shit, Sony touchdown. Oh shit, Chase touchdown. Oh shit, this person touchdown. Like Mac Jones threw like 4. We used Mac Jones score over Dak Prescott score in that week, and we're like, holy shit, we are live, totally live for $1 million. And that was more miserable than like, especially because of like what we do for work, and the things that it would help with for work was like that was way more miserable than like. Just losing. Like if we'd have got last, I'd have been like, whatever. I really don't care. So it's like not even the money aspect. It's just like the sweat of these things that what we do to ourselves is just pure torture. Absolutely pure torture.
Yeah, it's not an ideal way to condition your brain by any means. And I wish I had a good answer, but I don't. It's just like, well, I mean, the best answer is to just not sweat it, other than what you need to do for late swap. But I mean, obviously that's impossible.
It's also like, if you're not gonna, I don't know how people do that, not sweat it. It's like, I don't know if I would want to play as much.
I do it for other non-NFL sports. Like I don't sweat every NBA slate. I don't sweat every baseball slate. Like sometimes I just check back in, especially if I'm MMEing baseball. Like if I'm putting in like 20 entries or whatever, I'm like, great. I'll check tomorrow morning and see what happens.
That's a good point, because I think that's also a different perspective for if you're MMEing. It's like what to sweat, but not always.
Not really.
Like you know who your top exposures are, and you understand the rules you put into your build and all that stuff. But it's not the same as sweating at one single entry lineup, right? So that's definitely a good point. I guess that's probably what I would do if I wanted to lower the stress levels of sweating DFS. I would probably just 150 some low stakes stuff and not worry about it as much. So we got about 10 or 12 minutes left. The other thing I try to ask people is, and I feel like you have a good story, especially because I know Soccer Dave and Tuttle and everybody. How did young Davis Mattek get, like, how did we get here? How did you start in this whole space? Was this the long-term goal? How did Davis Mattek in fantasy football and what even has evolved now since fantasy football with the podcast and crypto and all your other interests? How did this all come to be?
It's actually even like kind of like a wilder story, like not wild, just like a bunch of like weird coincidences. So I go off to college. I'm 18. My grandma, my mom's mom, sent me a Craigslist post. I don't even know how she got it, why she was looking at this, of like some guy looking to have someone write like articles on his like dollars per click blog. I don't even remember what it was called. But I was like 18 years old, freshman in college, doing this, and I did that for a while. Damn, it's kind of feels like I'm getting old. I don't remember exactly how Soccer Dave found me. I know I started my own. Okay, I do remember what happened. So I started my own website, like blog basically, and was doing a podcast on that with a guy named Coleman Kelly, who true fantasy football OGs will remember. And Soccer Dave approached me, like just DM'd me and was like, I'll pay you like $25 an article to write on this website called fantasysports.org. And so we were doing that. And then somewhere along the line, Fantasy Douche started RotoViz. And me, John Moore, John Bales, Matthew Friedman, Anthony Amico, and probably two other people I'm forgetting right now all started to post on that blog. And basically, time comes down and I'm about ready to graduate college, and Soccer Dave scrapes up enough coins to pay me a very small monthly salary, but enough so that, because DFS was also very easy to win at back then. Yeah. So I could kind of count on some monthly income from DFS back then too. And he offered me a quote unquote job, which let's be real, it wasn't really a job. It was kind of a job back at the day for fantasy insiders.
Good old fantasy insiders. I still always get compliments when I first started. Well, after Dave and everybody came over to Better Collective to RG and stuff, he brought in some swag to the office, and I made sure to steal some of the fantasy insiders stuff before it all ran out, because he's obviously notorious for not
sending the shirts. It's funny, I probably have the largest collection of remaining fantasy insider stuff, and honestly, every time I do a Goodwill trip, some of the fantasy insider stuff ends up in the bag because I never wear it. It's like when would be appropriate to wear a fantasy insider shirt? I have Tuttle's men's league basketball jersey from 2014 or whatever, because he and his buddies got fantasy insiders like pennies made. So I have that one. Makes it out of the closet every once in a while when the sun's out.
That's pretty amazing. So you go from, I know a little bit because you and I talked plenty within the last several years, but before Sports Grid, but what made you start the Takecast, right? So that's been something that you've been growing for quite a while now. What was kind of your general motivation behind starting, not just sticking in the fantasy football space, but kind of in all your interests, obviously fantasy football, but tons of other stuff too?
So in between working for when Fantasy Insiders stopped and when I got a job at Sports Grid, I was working for a European company that was building a business-to-business product to sell to sports books that already exist in Europe, right? So Bet365 and all these things. And their idea was, we'll just build the DFS product and we'll sell it to you and basically license it. And all these casinos would have access to the same prize pools or whatever, with different skins and in the different language that you would need. Cause that's something I didn't think of. There's a big language barrier over there. People in Italy speak Italian. Not everyone speaks English, but you want to have people from Denmark entering into the same contest as someone from, wherever, France or whatever. And so my job for them was I did the salaries and made sure the player positions were correct and all this stuff for soccer. But really, it was a very easy job that just did not require a ton of my time. And they were paying me way too much money, especially for as young as I was and having basically no financial commitments. So I was like, I'm fucking bored. I'm just bored. And I love doing podcasts, and I don't have to do one for my job anymore. So I'm just gonna start my own, because I'd done one in the past that was just like fantasy sports, and I was like, I'm interested in way more stuff than fantasy sports these days. And then when I got the job at Sports Grid, they acquired the distribution rights for the show as part of hiring me.
Yeah. So I've always enjoyed the show, and if anybody is listening and you haven't listened to the Takecast, TAEK cast.
Really wish I wouldn't have called it that these days.
I like it. I think it's still catchy, but it's probably
there is just something about I was sending, so like this guy from this huge crypto firm, Masari, comes on the show last week, and I was like emailing his like press secretary, and I was like, yeah, the name of the show is the Takecast, and I was like, what are you fucking doing, dude? It's not the worst, but it's not the best either.
That's the hard part, is like any business or any project that I've ever been involved in, I appreciate for like the community, the customer, the person who cares about it, like the uniqueness of the name. Like I think Takecast is ironic, whatever, it fits, it makes sense for the brand of the show.
It's a good joke for the people who get it.
Yeah.
But the people who don't get it are like, I don't get it.
Right. So it doesn't look very professional to the people who don't get it, because you're like, this just looks like a fucking idiot. You just look like like an absolute idiot. So that's but I've always appreciated the show. I'm a little biased for sure, because like I know you, I know a lot of the people that you bring on from within our little space and bubble, and I'm also interested in a lot of the guests and stuff that you bring on, because a lot of us in this space have a lot of the similar interests, right? Different sports and crypto and all that stuff. And apparently life hacks is one that
people love the life hacks.
people love the life hacks. But was that like the goal straight up right away, to just dive into kind of all these different things that you were interested in, just kind of like it's a free for all podcast on whatever you're feeling at that time?
So the idea, like what I wanted to do, was I wanted it to be like kind of like the millennial version of the BS Report, which was my favorite podcast forever. Before Simmons, like he just is like, look, Bill, if you ever listen to this or you ever meet me, I love you. I've read everything you've ever written. I listened to your show for 15 years, but he's just such a boomer now that it's painful. Mm-hmm. I mean, he is a 55-year-old man with kids who are in high school. Like it's just too much to ask him to keep up with it all. Yeah. And so I was like, if a version of this existed where people were talking about the same stuff, really, like big cultural things that are happening and sports, like I would be really into that. And I wish that there was a version of Simmons that was 26 years old and was like telling people they need to stake their Tezos because the APY is really good. Like I would be really into that. So that was sort of like the idea. But really, I just wanted to have an excuse to talk about whatever I want to talk, because I was also really, really getting into crypto as like an idea at the time. There was, if you guys have never listened to it, there was my favorite podcast ever is Coin Talk Show that Aaron Lammer and Jay Kang host. And that was at a time that they were launching that show. And I could not wait for new episodes of that show to come out every single week. And I was like, well, I could do something like this. Like I could have similar guests on the show to come and talk about whatever's happening. So because that was also like 2017. So that was when people other than like nerds who knew how to run a node in their basement were caring about Bitcoin for the first time too.
Yeah. It was definitely a perfect time to start. It's so funny you bring up Simmons, and I've heard you talk about him before, but he was just recently on one of my, in the sports space, my favorite podcast, the podcast that I get excited, like literally the moment I get the notification, there's a new Low Post episode out.
Oh, it's the best. That is the best podcast. Yeah,
it is. It's the best sports podcast that exists, in my opinion. Like any sport, pick a sport. Zach is like
he's the best.
There's no one that I've found that can be such an incredible host, right? Like a host has a very particular skill set, but then he can also put the basketball hat on and communicate it well enough. Like that skill like just doesn't really exist. Like, I certainly
could not agree more.
I certainly don't have it in anything that I do. Like we're all trying to get better at that, but he's so good at it. And I love the game of basketball more from a fan perspective. Like you talked about, you'll sit and watch soccer. We talk like I'll do it Formula One or whatever. I'll sit and watch basketball, like even the NBA. And I love the kind of game within a game of the NBA and the like team building. Like people hate the like super teams and shit and all that.
No, I love that. Yeah. Which I think is like in big part. And the reason I even understand it the way I do is because of his show and because of his columns.
Yep. And so if Zach, if you're ever listening to this, I've listened to every episode of your podcast of all time, and please don't go the Simmons the Simmons route.
No, but I know what you're gonna say. It's like listening to those two specifically because Simmons used to be his boss, so there's like that dynamic. It is like, I mean, it's fascinating to listen to hear the dynamics play out. But Simmons will just say some wild shit that is so far from true, and then Zach is like, yeah, well, maybe Jason Tatum is better than Michael Jordan. Like maybe, but when Simmons comes on the low post, it's like a very specific style of episode. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and he is, and I do appreciate a little bit of it because I'm very hyperbolic. He is extremely hyperbolic in how he presents his basketball takes, particularly about the Celtics. Like, he was like early. So I was pointing to this because he was just recently on the low post, and I found myself, I'm walking the dogs and I'm just getting to, apparently I've just been triggered for the last like 3 weeks is what I'm finding out as we're recording today. But I'm just like triggered listening to Simmons talk about, he's like, oh yeah, 2 months ago I was like, the Celtics are dead, we need to blow it up, this is over, this team stinks. I'm like, they were like 4th in the East, and the guy is just like losing his shit, declaring this team the worst team in the NBA.
People were asking them to trade Jaylen Brown.
I know. Like they're literally the best team in the NBA right now. Now they're playing at that level, and now all of a sudden Simmons is just like, oh yeah, the Celtics are the best. He's like, I think the Celtics are the best team in the NBA now. I'm like, how could you possibly think that they needed to literally trade everyone 2 months ago? And but that's a very boomer-esque way to approach sports fandom, not living solely in the moment and solely from a short-sighted perspective, and not kind of thinking through the long-term aspect of things. And so taking in all this content, like you said, the low post, listening to your show, listening to some of the other stuff that I listen to, helps with that, because I find myself, I don't know if you do, I'll get sucked in. I mean, we just talked about the Tyreek Hill thing yesterday, and it's really easy to get sucked in, like, oh, who won or lost this trade, or how does this fit, how does that fit? And like, I really feel like that's something that can get lost in our space, particularly really, really quickly and easily, is like lack of perspective on all this, because we're just, I mean, especially like best ball, which we'll wrap up with a little best ball talk, is like, it's fucking 365 days a year now. People are drafting goddamn NFL teams on Underdog. So like every news item breaks, and it's like, that's it. Yeah. So I thought the Simmons thing was a good reference, because it's a perfect kind of crossover example of some of the things I think a lot of people struggle with.
Honestly, I just don't listen or engage with that much sports content, is really kind of how I deal with it. Is like I have my friends whose opinions I really trust, and I do listen to Ship Chasing a lot. Ship Chasing is actually the fantasy content that I bring in the most. But I actually, like, the same as you're saying, like, I find it too triggering to like listen to a ton. So like I'll even look at my list here. So I do listen to soccer podcasts, because again, it's like they can't really trigger me, because I'm not going to get triggered by like the boomerisms in soccer the same way I would for football. Like there are equivalents, right? Of like, but like a non-analytics take or whatever in soccer is just not going to trigger me the way someone being like, you shouldn't throw every first down would trigger me in football. But like a lot of what I listen to is like, just like pop culture stuff, TV, whatever, true crime. Because like if I was just going to listen to fantasy football stuff all the time, I would just be mad. I would just be triggered. I would just be like, the other one is, why am I forgetting? They've changed their name so many times. Skeets and Trey Kirby and Lee Ellis. No dunks. Yeah, I was about to call it the starters, but it's not called that anymore. And I listen to those guys because they just they're just all about having a good time and conveying the information. Like those guys are the best. But yeah, I mean, mostly I just avoid it by not engaging with a lot of the audio content. Now I read a lot. Like I like if I'm on Twitter this afternoon, someone's like, oh, I just posted my top 30 prospects or whatever. I just read JJ Zacharison's prospect guide, and I was like, that's all good information to take. For some reason, it's like always a little bit less triggering in written form. I don't know why that is.
It definitely is, and I don't really know why that is, but it absolutely is. And it's really funny that you bring that up because I don't like to talk about it a lot because there's this weird dynamic where you're in fantasy content, and then my advice to people is don't consume so much like that's what I would tell people. I like stop and I know there's some people like in my Discord right now that like if they wanted my honest advice, I think that they're thinking too much about fantasy about fantasy football. And I appreciate their enthusiasm and stuff and everything as a part of the community, but that's what has helped me. Definitely, if we're talking about the mental health thing,
you just don't want to. The thing is you don't want to take in too much information. Like, it's good to take in information, but I don't want to be hearing 6 different people's opinions about Sky Moore. I want to know what Crane thinks about Sky Moore, and I want to know like what Rich thinks about Sky Moore, and I don't need to know what 1,900 people think about Sky Moore because then I won't be able to decide for myself.
Yep. And so maybe we're just advanced enough in our careers of fantasy sports, both from a content perspective and from playing, to where I have the people that I trust. There's a handful of different people that I've developed a trust in their takes on, and I pretty much just lean on those people. And so like Tony says, I consume a ton of content every single week, and like I appreciate you listening to this. But honestly, if you listen to me for a half a year and you decided I wasn't for you, that's okay. My style isn't for everybody, but I think everybody should figure out.
Give me your click, but you don't have to listen.
Yeah, exactly. Just, I'll try to put some good thumbnails or some triggering headlines on my stuff to make you click on it. But I really don't care beyond that. But seriously, that's like my big thing. So I do consume sports content, but it's mostly actually basketball, like the low post. Like
that's more what I meant. What I meant to say is that I don't consume a ton of fantasy content. I mostly consume infotainment sports content, where it's like, it's more of like a casual thing as opposed to like, I need to be taking notes. Like I haven't listened to a DFS podcast I couldn't even tell you the last time I listened, because it's not going to be useful for me because it's going to mess with me, and then I'll be thinking about it when I'm working on projections. And it's like, I can't be doing that. Like, it'll just mess me all up.
No, I don't listen to it. I don't listen to anything at all. I feel like, especially now, like I haven't always done NFL shows. I've done NFL content for quite a while now, but I haven't always, like, I do a Sunday morning show now on Roto-Grinders, like basically leading up to lock.
Yeah.
And I don't want my opinions swayed when I'm like trying to give like my real and raw takes to people. I don't want to come in with some skewed brain. I want it to be like authentic because it's me and Ben Gretsch. And I'm like, I just want to have a real conversation with Ben. He and I haven't talked leading up into that show. And so I want that to be like an authentic, like, here's what I think. No, here's what I think, and kind of go back and forth. And obviously we're reacting in real time to the injury news and stuff like that. But so that's kind of generally everything I think I wanted to cover. But I do want to talk really quickly, I know we're running a little over, about the best ball stuff. Because I'm
chilling right now. I don't know.
We're about to head into the biggest fantasy sports summer in the history of mankind. Basically, even you talked about like the main event, this is a baseball show, but even the other season long stuff is probably going to grow this year.
I think they already said a main event is $1 million to first instead of $500,000, I believe.
There's going to be at least 3 millionaires crowned, maybe more, this year from fantasy football tournaments. That's
inflation for you, buddy.
Yeah, that is very. That's what happens when Trey Young and Alvin Kamara invest in underdog. That's the next thing that happens is all these price pools.
No doubt.
But what are you like? Has your opinion? We've talked a little bit about this from like the last year's shows, but like, what is your just like general thoughts on this space heading in? Like, do you think we see anytime in the near future some sort of like leveling off, kind of like we did in DFS, or like just how are you feeling about the best ball space right now?
I mean,
or just fantasy football and the main event
like
stuff too.
In general, I think we've seen this. They've launched basketball, baseball, like all these other products, and no one cares as much as they do about the NFL, which is fine. So like I don't know if we'll get $1 million to first for NBA ever or in the next several years. I mean, eventually Underdog will turn the marketing hose off from as dramatic as it is, and when they do that, they will start focusing more on turning a profit. I also, they're gonna want people to be playing their pick'em game. They're gonna, I don't think it's a secret that they're would like to get like a sports gaming license so that they don't have to do the pick'em games, and that they can just be like, do you want Trae Young over under 24.5 points, which is a super profitable business model. And the best ball stuff functions as a customer acquisition tool, and it's a great one because best ball is so fun. But eventually this will penetrate to FanDuel, this will penetrate to DraftKings and stuff, but eventually, just as we've seen with DFS, USFL DFS, they didn't even think they were going to have it until last week because Levitan like bullied them into it. But it's like at the end of the day, the fantasy games are way more fun. The fantasy games are way more fun to talk about, way more fun to produce content for, way more fun to listen to content about than like my numbers say that the Lakers should be 8.5 point favorites here, not 7.5 point favorites. So I've got a small wager on the Lakers. So I don't know. I mean, I just in general, I don't have a ton of the answers. My thought would be is that there is like a capped number of people in the world who want to play fantasy football tournaments. Now, more people definitely want to play best ball than want to join the main event, right? With the management and the prohibitive cost of entry and like the boomer software, I mean, all due respect to the FFPC, but the Underdog app is just like, it's unparalleled. It's the best. It's why we all play on Underdog all the time anyways, even though the prize pool, like literally any other best ball is way better use of your money from like an ROI perspective. But and another thing I am hoping that they do, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, is I hope they do a cumulative points best ball tournament, maybe 100K to first instead of $1 million, whatever. That would be great. I'd be all in on that. And then I wonder if they soft launch this super flex one to hard launch a super flex one after the NFL draft at some point. Because that would be a lot of fun. I mean, I think that format is really cool.
I think that's the thing I'm most bullish on because I agree basically with everything that you said. It's we're so new in the game formats, and that there's so many different things that they can do to kind of tickle everybody's fancy and keep the big thing is like the casual Joe Schmo probably doesn't even want to play Superflex, but it's them being willing to do that and do a cumulative one and do the stupid backyard best ball one, right? And do rookies and sophomores. It keeps their most important customers around to keep trying something, to keep doing different
and to always give the content creators something to talk about like that. Like they're not paying you and I right now to talk about it, but they just have earned that right in the conversation, which is so massive for them. That's worth whatever money they're spending right now.
So I am going to hit a couple of these questions. Connor's first. Do you think they'll make a peer-to-peer version of Pick'em? The problem is any potential like across state lines type of stuff. I think they have some issues with peer-to-peer.
That'll be a long time if it does happen. Because like everyone always says this, by the way, that's like a big thing. It's like, a peer-to-peer sports wagering marketplace or whatever, but like that already exists and it's not that popular. People bet some. It already exists in Europe and not that many people use it. It's not like it's like for sickos only. Like it's not for people like you and I who are just like, I'd like to bet $100 on the Lakers to win this game tonight. Will someone take my action? Like it's not like that basically.
Yeah, it's really funny that Connor asked that because myself and a couple others actually went down the path of researching, investigating, thinking about like a peer-to-peer market, because I do think, like you said, I think it's just going to be the government works so slow, and the Wire Act is not something.
It's like 10 years away at best.
And so, the Wire Act is the absolutely the prohibitor to all this, not being able to have, I'm even like, you and I are really not very far apart, but we just happen to be on opposite sides of a state line. And you and I could not bet against each other because of Missouri and Illinois laws. But I do think that there's peer-to-peer stuff has some potential long-term in the future because of the hurdles right now. Like, no products are done very well from like a UX perspective. Like, if Underdog did it right compared to
that is a good
like,
point. Yeah,
it, like the user experience on Betfair is like painful. Like, there's a reason why
I've never even download, like I've never even messed around with it.
It's a hideous looking interface and stuff. And so, like, if someone will do it in our lifetime, I think, but it's so far down the road that it's and it's not so far down the road because no one wants to try it. It's so far down the road because there's no real way to do it profitably based on current legislation.
I have a $1 billion idea whenever that stuff gets sorted out. But either rock, paper, scissors or flipping a coin for people for money, and you rake like 0.05% of the wager. Literally $1 billion a year. Literally $1 billion business. So I need to patent that.
I don't know if I'm supposed to even tell this, but I don't give a shit. The DK guys at the we just had what was the most recent one? Fantasy Football World Championship, I think. Anyway, we're at the live event for the Fantasy Football World Championship. We're out on one of the nights with the DK VIP guys. And, so sometimes we ask them questions about their VIPs and things that they do. They're taking care of all their best customers. But now it's not just DFS people. Honestly, us DFS people are kind of peasants compared to the big whale sports bettors and stuff like that. And what they actually said, the true whales, like whales from a VIP perspective, not necessarily whales from like a making money perspective, but how much they dump onto the site, are like the people that play the slot machine on their app.
100%.
So
100%.
It's those people, the people playing blackjack and slots and the stupid casino games on the DraftKings app. And so, to your point, people are degenerate gamblers and they just want to get action in.
They just want to get a little bit of action. Yeah.
Right. We're sitting on the shitter or on our couch making DFS lineups or whatever. And they want to they just want to gamble on anything. And so, and anything like that will probably be successful if it has the right backing behind it. So we've gone a little bit over, but what's your kind of plans moving forward? Same status quo kind of as last year, just chugging along with Sports Grid and fantasy football stuff, or you got any like fun, exciting plans for the next 6 months before football hits?
Honestly, no. I'm getting married in August. So yeah. I would prefer for this to be a very business as normal year for me in working and in finance and in all. I mean, if Bitcoin wanted to exponentially appreciate in value, that would be fine. But other than that, I would appreciate life to be very static because I don't want any big life changes to be happening in the same year I'm about to get married. That would not be tight for many reasons.
Well, buying a house.
Yep, did that.
To Tyler Hero for that one, right? That was
shout out to me for not really planning for my taxes, doing my taxes yesterday and being like, fuck.
I still haven't started because it again.
However annoying you think it's gonna be more annoying.
So much.
Dude, the cap gains on some of these things I've sold. It's like unbelievable. Like I'm like funding a senator's vacation right now. Like I'm paying for their vacation to the Maldives. It is so tilting. I'm unbelievably tilted.
I know. And that tells me we talked about 20 different things that tilt and trigger us. That's the worst one when it gets down to tax time. I can suffer through getting my ass kicked on DFS slates or losing GPPs by a half a point or a catch or the stupid ass 300-yard bonus or whatever. Like I've been through that, but this now, like, especially, in the the crypto world that we live in now, like it makes it just so much worse when you're gambling, investing in crypto and different assets that you didn't even know existed however many years ago, and the country is not really evolved around. It is the most
it's
miserable.
just like
And
the
obviously paying the
way,
government.
because the way it's written, it just, and it's like, look, I'm paying my taxes. I'm not gonna try and not pay my taxes. But it's
Right.
like something very simple of like, I bought. It's like I bought $8,000 of Ethereum, and this is just an example, but the way it gets treated is like I just profited all of that money, when realistically it was like basically just holding it as a stable coin or whatever. It's like my Coinbase 1099. It's like, it's just a nightmare, and it's not the way it should be taxed, but it just is what it is. And it's like, it's honestly part of one of the reasons why I'm like down for Congress to figure all this stuff out, because it'll be good. Like there are some things about the crypto legislation that are going to be painful, but like these are all things that are going to get resolved when the nerds all sit in a room and write these bills out.
Yeah, definitely. So that pretty much wraps us up. Make sure you go, I'm sure you already are, but if you are not, go follow Davis on Twitter at Davis Mattek. Subscribe to the Takecast. This is not me, just patting Davis on the back because he's here. I highly recommend it. If you watch this, it's probably something that you're interested in, a lot of kind of similar conversation. One of the podcasts that I listen to, among things that we talked about, I'm not very into fantasy football and those kind of podcasts, but the Takecast is one of them. For Spike Week, for our Spike Week folks, we're doing a fun, if you didn't watch last night's show, we're doing a fun experiment tomorrow. We're doing a fun show. Rob Coakley at King Coakley is joining me tomorrow, and there are 4 different sports in the Underdog lobby right now for best ball drafts. We are going to simultaneously draft a team in each single one. So at the exact same time, we will be doing a Superflex NFL draft, an NBA playoff draft, an NHL playoff draft, and I know about 8 players, and they're all on the Blues in the NHL.
Perfect.
And an MLB regular season best ball draft. So sometime late afternoon, 4:30, 5 o'clock ish for that one. So make sure to join in for that one. I'm actually I don't know if I'm looking forward to it, but I think it'll be fun and crazy. So for myself and for Davis and for Rob tomorrow, my guy, we will catch you guys later.